Good morning, everyone. This is Tammy Smith with the Office of Federal Programs. On behalf of Superintendent Hoffmeister and the Office of Federal Programs, I want to thank you for joining us this morning for this webinar entitled Career and Post-Secondary Opportunities for Homeless Youth. Today, we're going to, of course, go over some definitions. We're going to talk about the expenses associated for students who are applying for post-secondary education. We're going to talk a little bit about the basics of Fafsa, some ways of maybe helping the students pay for college. We'll talk briefly about career and technical education and how to help undocumented students. Okay, so we being in the education know this, that people with higher levels of education have higher levels of income. They are more likely to have access to employer provided benefits, are more likely to move up the socioeconomic ladder, are less likely to be unemployed, and are less likely to be receiving public benefits. So of course, that's our goal, is to get our homeless students to have access to these things. And so I've put a couple of charts on here. The more you learn, the more you earn. And so as you can see, the more education you have, the more likely or more income you're going to earn over your lifetime. And then also this here is just to kind of show the highlight of the preventative value of education. All the groups listed here are at a higher risk of experiencing homelessness. But if you'll notice, those youth with less than a high school diploma or GED have the highest level of risk of being homelessness. And my next slide, these are just the references to where I got those two charts from, the information on those charts. So under the education subtitle of McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, the term homeless children and youth means individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This specifically includes children and youth whose living situation falls into one of the following categories: temporarily staying with other people due to loss of housing or economic hardship, staying in emergency or transitional shelters, staying in motels, campgrounds, cars, parks, abandoned buildings, bus or train stations, or any public or private place not designed for humans to live in, or if they're staying in substandard housing. Accompanied homeless youth, and one of the important things when the students fill out the FAFSA is to know if they are accompanied or unaccompanied. So an accompanied homeless youth is the child or youth who falls into one of the categories that I just described, and they are in the physical custody or living with a parent or guardian. So if their situation meets the definition of a homeless youth, but they're living with a parent or guardian, they're considered accompanied. An unaccompanied homeless youth is a child or youth who falls into one of the categories to make them eligible to be determined as homeless, and they are not in the physical custody or living with a parent or a guardian. So that would make them an unaccompanied homeless youth. A few other terms we'll talk about today: at risk of being homeless, when a student's housing may cease to be fixed, regular, and adequate, then they are at risk of being homeless. For example, a student who is being evicted and has been unable to find fixed, regular, or adequate housing. A self-supporting student is when that student pays for his own living expenses, including a fixed, regular, and adequate home. And then recognize third parties. Information about a student's homeless status can come from recognized third parties, such as private or publicly funded homeless shelters and service providers, high school counselors, mental health professionals, social workers, mentors, doctors, clergy, and homeless liaisons. So when we're looking at the college admissions process, we have the advanced placement test, we have the ACT and or the SAT that the students may take as entrance exams. We have college applications that have to be completed. There's the Fafsa. There's also private scholarship applications. And I've got some references here on the screen for you for this. And while I'm thinking about it, let me say this PowerPoint will be posted on our website. It'll take a couple of days to get it up there, but you'll have access to this and all of these references that I'm going to be using today. Okay, so when you're looking at application expenses for college, you've got the AP test applications, you've got the ACT fees you've got to pay, the SATs, then the college entrance exam, fees. And so if you are taking the ACT, maybe taking the SAT as well, applying to 3 or 4 colleges, a student can spend about $300 just trying to get into college, right? And so one of the things that we want to do is help that student overcome the barrier of having to pay those fees. So advanced placement or AP exams, most 4-year colleges give students credit or advanced placement or both based on their AP exam scores. This is up to each college or institution to set its own policy as to which tests it will accept for credit, how much credit it will give, and what score is required for the credit. The AP exam fee waivers are available for eligible students with no limit on the number of waivers per student. To qualify for these AP exam fee waivers, the student needs to be eligible for free or reduced lunches, which then makes homeless students automatically eligible for these fee waivers. Waivers are administered at the school, so you need to talk with your school's AP coordinator, get to know them really well and work with them so that you can get these waivers for your homeless students. And again, here are some references for you to go to for additional information. Then if we're looking at the ACT, there are also fee waivers that homeless students can use so that they are not having to pay the fee to take the ACT. To qualify for one of these waivers, the student must be enrolled in high school in the 11th or 12th grade, and they have to meet one or more of the following indicators of economic need. That student could be receiving free or reduced lunches. They might live in a foster home, be a ward of the state, or they are experiencing homelessness. They could be enrolled in TRIO or Gear Up or a similar program. Their family might live in subsidized housing or be receiving public assistance, or their family income is below the USDE's reduced price lunch level. So any one of those situations will qualify that student to get the free ACT fee waivers. Students can use the waiver to take the ACT up to 4 times. They get the waiver from the high school counselor. The counselors get these waivers in the summertime. The waiver covers the basic test fees, including sending the test scores to unlimited colleges. What it does not cover are late registration fees or change fees if they have to change the date or place of the testing. So they can access that and take the ACT up to 4 times with that waiver. The SAT meets the same qualifications for the fee waiver. They must be enrolled in high school in the 11th or 12th grade, or if they are taking an SAT subject test, they can be in grades 9 through 12, and they still have to meet one or more of those indicators of economic need. Again, the waiver must be obtained from the student's high school counselor or an authorized agency. So shelter directors will sometimes have these waivers for them. The student can receive up to 4 waiver cards, 2 waivers for the SAT and 2 waivers for the SAT subject test. The waiver covers basic test fees and sending test results to unlimited colleges. Like the ACT, it does not cover change fees, but it does cover late registration fees, which the ACT waiver does not. Waivers are also available for 11th graders taking the PSAT test. And again, for more information, I've linked there a website. Students who qualify for the College Board's SAT fee waivers also qualify to receive up to 4 requests for waiver of college application fee forms. These forms should be included with the student's college applications and sent to colleges that are included in the SAT fee waiver directory of colleges. And the links for that is there as well. There's also the National Association of College Admission Counseling form. This is a form that is to be completed with the help of the high school counselor. It's for graduating high school seniors who will be entering college in the fall. Has the same eligibility criteria as the ACT and the SAT waivers, and can be based on income and or the counselor's knowledge of the family's circumstances. Most colleges accept the College Board or the NACAC waiver forms, although individual institutions may have their own fee waiver policies, and those will vary depending upon the institution. Colleges that use the common application accept the SAT college application fee waiver, and some colleges do not charge application fees for students that apply online. So you would want to encourage your students to apply online if possible. If the institution waives the fees, then save the waivers for colleges that don't waive the fee automatically. And then one last thing I'd like to point out is that you cannot use your McKinney-Vento subgrant funds or your Title I Part A set-aside funds to pay for AP exams, college entrance exams, or college application fees. The reason for that, there's a couple of reasons. One, these title funds are for the use of pre-K through high school completion. And so if we're talking about funds for help with post-secondary education, that is outside of what these funds are for. And so you can't use them. The other reason is we're supposed to use these funds for those things or those needs that are not covered otherwise, right? And so if you can get these fee waivers, then they can be covered with some other source of funding. So you would not be able to use the funds in that regards either. So get with your counselors, your AP coordinators, and work that out with them. But they have waivers for your students. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Fafsa, or the free application for federal student aid. And I put the official Fafsa web address there. All students applying for federal aid must complete a Fafsa for each school year for which they are seeking federal aid. A new Fafsa is released in October of each year for the coming year. For example, for the school year that we're in now, this Fafsa was released in October of 2020 and is valid for students attending school in the fall of 2021 and the spring of 2022. And the students and their parents would use their prior year tax information. So that would be their tax information from their 2019 tax return. So you want to encourage your students to fill out the Fafsa as soon as possible. One because they run out of money. And then two, because your state and your institutional deadlines will vary. So it may not be too late this year for this coming fall to complete the FAFSA. It will depend on the institution that your student is wanting to attend. So you would need to check their deadlines. But you always want to encourage your students to apply for the FAFSA as soon as the new one is released in the fall. Okay, so how do they calculate federal aid? So EFC is the expected family contribution, and ED calculates the EFC based on the information submitted on the FAFSA. So on the FAFSA, they're going to either be a dependent student or an independent student. A dependent student must report their parent information on the FAFSA. So if their parent files tax returns, then that student has to report that income. And the expected family contribution is based on the parents and the student's income and assets. If they are considered an independent student, they do not report their parent information on the FAFSA. And their expected family contribution would be based only on that student's income and assets. So how do you determine if they are a dependent or an independent student? So students experiencing homelessness with their family fill out the FAFSA as dependent students. Okay, the key there is that they are experiencing homelessness with their family. They are accompanied, or they are in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. However, their living arrangements meet the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless. Okay, their expected family contribution is based on family income and assets. So homeless students from low-income families likely will qualify for the maximum amount of federal aid. And one of the things that they are qualifying for when they fill out this FAFSA is the Pell Grant, right? And grants are good because grants don't have to be paid back. If they are an unaccompanied homeless youth or an unaccompanied youth at risk of homelessness, they will fill out the FAFSA as an independent student. So just as a reminder, unaccompanied means they are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. They are homeless. Their living arrangement meets the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless, or they are at risk of homelessness because their housing may cease to be fixed, regular, and adequate at any time. Unaccompanied homeless students ages 23 or younger, or still in high school on the date the student signs the FAFSA, will qualify as independent students. Once a student reaches the age of 24 or older, they automatically qualify for the independent student status. So they would no longer have to use their parents' information. You, as the homeless liaison, are authorized to make determinations of an unaccompanied homeless youth status. Every LEA is required to designate a liaison for homeless children and youth, and liaisons are specifically required to inform unaccompanied homeless youth of their status as independent students on the FAFSA and to assist them to obtain determinations. And here's the law for that. For students graduating from high school who were identified as unaccompanied homeless youth while in high school, you as the homeless liaison are one of those determiners of that independent status, okay? The other three determiners who can make that determination are the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Shelter Director or designee. The students have to have received services from the shelter in order to use this, okay? The director of a shelter is not going to make a determination if that student has not received service at their shelter. Also, runaway and homeless youth ACT shelter director or designee, again, for students who have received services. And then the fourth determiner of independent status would be the financial aid administrator. So for any student that one of the other three cannot make that determination, the financial aid administrator there at the college can make that determination. Now I want to go back to this slide right here and show you that it also says that the homeless liaison can make subsequent year determinations for college sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So if you have made the determination that a student is eligible to be considered an unaccompanied homeless student, getting ready to go into their freshman year of college, you can make subsequent years determinations for them as well. But in order to do that, you have to have knowledge that their situation is still the same. So you would have to stay in touch in some way with that homeless youth, or they would have to stay in touch with you so that you would know what their situation is. So I would suggest that you encourage your students that are unaccompanied homeless youth to check in with you every semester or so, just to kind of let you know how it's going, let you know what their situation is. So if they need one of those letters for, say, their sophomore year, and then again their junior and senior, you can make that determination based on knowledge that you have. And here is the question, the reference to where it tells you that as the local liaison, you have the option to make those subsequent year determinations for unaccompanied homeless youth. Again, if you have access to the information necessary to make such a determination. And so this is just some stats from 2018, 2019 of who made determinations for your unaccompanied homeless youth attending colleges that year. And if you will notice, by far, the most determinations were made by the local homeless liaison, okay, with the RIA shelter directors coming in at a far second, and then your HUD shelter directors. And at the very bottom is your financial aid administrators making that determination. And the reason being is because they oftentimes just don't have the information available to make that determination. They don't know of the student's situation before the student gets to the college. The other thing that you can do to help with that is help the student gather other sources of that. So if you are writing that determination letter, and I'm going to give you an address here pretty soon to get that letter if you don't have access to that or haven't used it previously. But the other thing you can do, as well as your own letter, is to encourage that student to reach out to others that may know of their circumstances, right? So if they have a counselor or a teacher or a member of the clergy, someone like that is also aware of their circumstances, the more that they can, the more documentation of their living circumstances that they can provide in written form, letter form to the financial aid administrators, the easier it is for them to get that determination in their favor, right? So each year, ED's Office of Federal Student Aid releases an updated application and verification guide, or an AVG, for your financial aid administrators. And I've given you where the 2021 AVG is available at. If a student does not have and cannot get a determination from a local homeless liaison, a RIA provider, or a HUD provider, then the financial aid administrator must make a determination of an accompanied homeless youth and their status. And again, it is much easier for that unaccompanied homeless youth to walk in with those letters of determination already, as opposed to trying to convince a federal aid administrator that they are an unaccompanied homeless youth. If the student has answered yes to the questions on the FAFSA regarding the unaccompanied homeless youth, there's not necessarily a need for that federal aid administrator to verify the information unless they have conflicting information or think that there's conflicting information, and then they are going to investigate further. The online FAFSA includes a homeless filter question and a homeless determination question, including those for youth who have not had a determination yet. So encourage your unaccompanied homeless youth to complete the FAFSA online. Now, the 3 things that you as the homeless liaison can do to help homeless youth is let them know about the FAFSA, okay? Sometimes our homeless youth may assume that they cannot pursue higher education because of their lack of resources and lack of parental support. They are unlikely to know that they have a special status on the FAFSA that allows them to apply for financial aid without a parent's signature. We're talking about unaccompanied homeless here, or their parents' financial information. And they also don't always recognize the importance of completing the FAFSA as early as possible. So you should work with your school counselors and whoever else is available to help assist the homeless and the unaccompanied homeless youth to get that FAFSA completed. Also help by informing them of their unaccompanied homeless student status. Also, completing the FAFSA is challenging for many students due to its complexity and length. So they may not have a parent who is able or willing to help them with this process. So again, that's a role that you can step into and encourage them not only to apply, but maybe have some FAFSA nights where, you open up a lab at school and they can come in and start the FAFSA, bring their parents in, and you can help them with that. And then you want to remove the documentation barriers related to the FAFSA. So again, unaccompanied homeless youth may face barriers related to documentation of their homeless status. 1, they may not know that they're considered unaccompanied homeless, but 2, if they're thinking that they have to have their parents' information, that may keep them from applying for the FAFSA. And so that can be problematic to them. So here is the website for the a sample letter that you can download, make it your own, put it on your letterhead, your district's letterhead, that type of thing, and give that to the student so that they will have that letter and they will understand and be able to give that to the colleges that they have been determined that they are an unaccompanied homeless youth. I would also suggest that you keep a copy of that in case they lose it, because they are very mobile and they move around a lot and things get misplaced or lost. And then also inform them that they can come back to you next year and you will complete that form again for them if they stay in touch with you so that you know that they are still in the same unaccompanied homeless situation. Living in the dorms does not take them out of being determined to be eligible as a homeless student. Dorms are not considered fixed, regular, and adequate. Okay, so just because they stay in the dorm during the school year does not make them ineligible to receive that determination of being unaccompanied and homeless. Okay, so I've just put some FAQs on here about the FAFSA. For instance, here we have one. We have students who live with relatives, but there's no legal documentation stating that these relatives are the legal guardians. Is this student an unaccompanied homeless youth? The presence or absence of legal guardianship papers do not by themselves indicate that a student meets the definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth. Students who are staying with other people, and this includes relatives, due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason meet the definition of homeless. If the student is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, then he or she also meets the definition of being unaccompanied. Okay. If the student's status changes from when they originally completed the Fafsa, can they update their status? So if that student was housed when they filled out the FAFSA and something changes, their parent loses a job and they're evicted, so now they're without a home, or the parent kicks the student out and now they're unaccompanied, then certainly the student can go in there and change the status on their FAFSA. Okay, they don't have to wait till the next year. If a dependent student was recently evicted along with their parents, would we change them to at risk of being homeless, which would make them independent? And that answer is no. Since the student is still with their parents, they would not meet the definition of unaccompanied and therefore would not be an independent student based on the eviction alone. They would be homeless, but they wouldn't be unaccompanied and homeless. And you can only be considered a dependent student if you are unaccompanied and homeless, okay? So I know I keep going over that, but gotta get that right. And again, this is just more information about you as the homeless liaison, providing documentation after they begin college. And as long as you are aware of their ongoing situation, you can provide that documentation. Okay, always encourage the completion of the FAFSA. Okay. Statistics show that many students who could benefit from financial aid do not complete the FAFSA. One national study found that about 30% of students failed to file FAFSA and that 1/3 of those students would have been eligible to receive federal Pell Grants. Most commonly, students did not complete the FAFSA because they thought they had no financial needs. They didn't think they would qualify for aid. They didn't want to take on student debt, or they had trouble filling out the forms. But many of them just find that the FAFSA is lengthy, confusing, and difficult to complete. Okay, next, I'm just going to touch real briefly on private scholarships. You're going to want to encourage your students to check with their high school counselor for a list of available scholarships. And I've just put some places here that they can check. Your counselor probably has, longer list of places they can check. But I do want to encourage you to encourage your students to apply for these scholarships. In fact, one of our very own Oklahoma students was awarded a Schoolhouse Connection Scholarship last spring. And so it does happen. So have them get on these. Now, we all know that scholarships, it takes work to find them and it takes work to apply for them, but encourage your students to do that. Then there's the state resources, the Oklahoma's Promise. To enroll in the Oklahoma Promise program, the student must be an Oklahoma resident, enrolled in the 8th, 9th, or 10th grade in an Oklahoma high school when they enroll. And when they enroll, their parents must earn $55,000 or less per year. So what does that do for them? Upon completion of the program's requirements, students will earn tuition at an Oklahoma public 2-year college or a 4-year university, or a portion of tuition at an accredited Oklahoma private college or university, or a portion of tuition for approved programs at Oklahoma public technology centers. Okay, that's a pretty big deal. So if you have students that are homeless and you get them in the 8th, 9th, or 10th grade, help them and their parents sign up for Oklahoma's Promise. Okay, that will take care of a lot of things for them. And I'm going to talk very briefly about career and technical education, mainly because I don't know a lot about this. This is an area where I need to find out more information as well. But I do know that the Perkins 5 designates individuals experiencing homelessness and youth who are in or have aged out of the foster care system as special populations. And local career and technical education funds may be used to reduce or eliminate out-of-pocket expenses for special populations participating in CTE, including those participating in dual or concurrent enrollment or early college high school programs. And these costs associated with fees, transportation, child care, or mobility challenges, they can get support and help for those fees as well through the Perkins 5 funds. So encourage your students to, if they're not wanting to go to college, encourage them to go the career and technical education route, where they're going to get hands-on learning environment, opportunities to explore and experience potential careers, knowledge and skill development in multiple career pathways. Maybe if funds are really, they're wanting to go to an expensive college, maybe one way to get there is to attend a career and technical education and get something that they can actually be working at and making money, and then go to college after that when they have more funds. A lot of your career and technical schools do internships. It's a good way to get your foot in the door with a job. So if your students are not interested in college or think they can't afford it, this is another way for them to get some type of post-secondary training and education to help them be able to, lead a successful life past homelessness, hopefully, okay? And then lastly, I'm going to touch real briefly on undocumented students. An undocumented student is one that is not a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. They do not possess a green card, visa, or other legal documentation. And these students may face obstacles in 3 areas. One being college admission, the second one tuition, and the third financial aid. Okay, access to higher education for undocumented students is state-specific and institution-specific, meaning that there is no federal law prohibiting the admission of undocumented students into U.S. colleges and universities. So some state and some private institutions will permit the admission of undocumented students. The problem comes in that to pay for tuition. Some institutions that allow undocumented students enroll will treat them as out-of-state or foreign students, making them ineligible for state aid or in-state tuition, and making them pay those out-of-state tuition costs, right? But some states will permit undocumented students to pay in-state tuition under certain circumstances. So they will just have to check with the university that they are wanting to attend and see what their policies are. The other thing is that undocumented students are not eligible for federal student aid. Sometimes they're not eligible for state aid. If they're looking at a private college or university, those colleges and universities set their own policies. So some will grant scholarships and other aid to undocumented students. Some private scholarships will require the applicants to be U.S. citizens or legal residents, while others do not. So you can help these students navigate through this just by helping them find out which schools they are interested in, and then checking with those schools on what their policies are as far as the tuition rates. Do they allow undocumented students to enroll? And then finding out if they can qualify for any state aid, or if the institution offers scholarships or aid that the student may be eligible for. So again, here are some more references. And so now I'm going to open this up for questions in the chat box, if there are some here. And I am not seeing any questions. I'll wait just a little bit to see if anybody's going to type any questions. Otherwise, again, this PowerPoint will be available on our website. It usually takes a couple of days to get it posted, so it should probably be up on the website by Friday. You know, the sde.ed.gov, go to federal programs, and then click on Title IX. Okay, no questions. I'm going to show my.
Oops, one popped up.
Oh. Says, quick note regarding Oklahoma's promise, contact them directly regarding an unaccompanied youth student application. Absolutely, right? They will probably have to provide some kind of parent documentation just because of the nature of the way it's set up. Here's my contact information. You can call me or send me an email if you think of any questions after we're gone. But I appreciate you joining us this morning, and I hope that you found this informative. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to let everybody go. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sunshine.